I still remember the smell of lavender and hospital coffee the night my sister looked at me like she was trying to warn me about something she no longer had the strength to say out loud. She was dying. And I thought the hardest part of that week would be saying goodbye. I was wrong. Because around midnight, a woman from room 214 grabbed my hand in the hallway and whispered something so unsettling, so personal, that I tried to convince myself she was just confused. So I ignored her warning. Biggest mistake of my life. Less than 24 hours later, that same woman walked into my sister's hospice room while my nephew stood there holding legal papers. And what she exposed shocked every person in that room. Before I tell you what happened, tell me down below in the comments where you're listening from tonight, and if you've ever ignored a gut feeling and later realized you should have listened. Now let me tell you how one stranger in hospice saved my sister's final wishes from being stolen right in front of us. My name is Lorraine Whitaker. I'm 71 years old, and for almost 4 decades I worked the front desk at a Chevrolet dealership outside Amarillo, Texas. I was the kind of woman who kept receipts in labeled envelopes and clipped coupons even when I didn't need to. Every Friday morning, same diner, same booth, same order. Scrambled eggs, wheat toast, black coffee. Folks used to tease me and say, "Lorraine, you trust a calculator more than people." Truth is, they weren't wrong. At least that's what I thought. Because the woman I'm about to tell you about, the woman sitting in room 214 at that hospice center in northern Arizona, she saw something in my family before I did. My older sister's name was Diane Mercer. She was 5 years older than me and tougher than shoe leather. Back in 1974, after our daddy disappeared somewhere outside Tulsa with a waitress and a fishing boat, Diane was the one who held our family together. That woman worked double shifts at a diner while finishing nursing school at night. She taught me how to drive, how to spot a liar, how to survive when life kicked dirt in your face. And Lord, the irony of that last one still keeps me awake sometimes. My sister lost her only son and daughter-in-law in a terrible car accident nearly 15 years ago. Ever since then, her grandchildren became her whole world. They were the only thing that kept her going through all that heartbreak. By the spring of last year, Diane was dying from liver cancer. Fast. One week she was watering tomatoes in her backyard outside Flagstaff. 3 weeks later she was in hospice. I got the call on a Monday afternoon from her granddaughter Melanie. Sweet girl. Schoolteacher up in Denver. Voice shaking so bad I could barely understand her. She said, "Aunt Lorraine, Grandma's asking for you." I didn't even finish packing proper. I threw 2 blouses, my medications, and a pair of jeans into an old overnight bag, and hit Interstate 40 before sunrise Tuesday morning. When I got there, Lord, nothing prepares you for seeing the strongest person in your life suddenly look small. Diane had always been broad-shouldered, loud laugh, silver hair piled up messy like a country singer from the 70s. Now she looked fragile enough to break under the blanket. But her eyes? Still sharp. Still Diane. First thing she did when I sat beside her bed was grab my wrist with those cold little fingers and whisper, "Has Travis been here yet?" Travis was her grandson, 43 years old, lived in Reno, worked in financial consulting, though I never fully understood what that meant. Fancy title, expensive watch, always talking fast. I told her no, not yet. She closed her eyes for a second like she was bracing herself against something. Then she whispered, "Don't let him rush me." At the time, I thought she meant funeral arrangements. God help me, I really did. The hospice center sat up on a hill outside Sedona surrounded by pine trees and red dirt roads. Quiet place. Smelled like coffee, hand sanitizer, and lavender candles all mixed together. Across the hall from Diane's room was an older woman named Eleanor Pike. Late 70s maybe. Tiny little thing with white curls and giant glasses hanging off a chain around her neck. The nurses told me she'd been there nearly 2 months already. Hardly ever had visitors. Just one son who apparently came by once every few weeks and stayed long enough to complain about insurance paperwork before leaving again. First couple days, Eleanor barely spoke. I'd pass her while grabbing stale coffee from the family lounge and she'd just nod politely. One afternoon I brought her half a blueberry muffin and she smiled and said, "Well, ain't you sweeter than gas station pie?" That made me laugh. After that we'd chat here and there. Nothing deep. Weather. Bad coffee. Arizona traffic. Little old people stuff. Then Friday night came. I remember because a monsoon storm rolled through after sunset. Rain hammering the windows. Thunder shaking the hallway lights. I'd been sitting beside Diane nearly 11 straight hours listening to oxygen machines hiss and beep. Around midnight I stepped out to stretch my legs. As I passed room 214, Eleanor was sitting awake in her recliner wearing a pink robe, lamp glowing beside her. She looked at me and said, "Your sister's scared." Not dramatic. Not nosy. Just matter of fact. I stopped. Said, "Yeah, I think she is." Eleanor stared toward the rain hitting the glass. Then she said quietly, "She keeps talking in her sleep about papers." That made my stomach twitch a little. I asked her what she meant. Eleanor shrugged slowly. Says her grandson keeps asking her to sign things before Saturday. I forced a chuckle. Travis handles finances. Probably estate stuff. Eleanor looked me dead in the eye. "Honey, have you ever met somebody who looked at you like they already knew the ending to a story you hadn't figured out yet?" That was her. She said, "My husband lost everything before he died because of estate stuff." Then she leaned closer and whispered, "If anybody pushes you to sign something quick in a hospice room, slow the whole thing down." I thanked her politely, but inside, I brushed it off, because Travis was family. I'd held that boy on my hip at church picnics, bought him his first baseball glove, watched him cry at his mama's funeral when he was 16. The idea that he tried to manipulate a dying woman? No, ma'am. Wouldn't even fit in my head. That was my first mistake. Travis arrived the next afternoon around 1:30, and the second I saw him walk through those hospice doors, something in my chest tightened. Not because of anything obvious, because sometimes your gut notices things before your brain catches up. He looked polished. Too polished. Camel-colored coat. Italian loafers. Perfect haircut. Didn't look like a man visiting his dying grandmother. Looked like a realtor heading to a steakhouse meeting. He hugged me hard and said, "Lorraine, wow, you look good." That right there? That's how I knew something was off. Nobody says you look good walking into hospice. Then he walked to Diane's bedside and instantly turned soft-spoken and emotional, like flipping on a television character. "Grandma. Hey, sweetheart. I'm here." He held her hand, kissed her forehead, even wiped his eyes once. And for a moment, I felt ashamed for doubting him. But then Diane looked over at me. Not at him. At me. And there was fear in her face. Real fear. About an hour later, Travis asked if we could grab coffee downstairs. We sat in the little cafeteria near the vending machines while rain dripped outside the windows. And that's when he brought it up. He folded his hands together real calm and said, "So Grandma wants me to handle the lake house transfer before things get messy." The lake house was outside Prescott. Beautiful property Diane and her husband bought back in the 80s for almost nothing. These days, worth close to $950,000 easy. Travis explained that if paperwork wasn't signed immediately, probate would eat the estate alive. Said lawyers would take a huge chunk. Said taxes would destroy everything. He talked fast. Real fast. Like a salesman trying to close before you can think. Then he said, "I already had an attorney draft everything up. We just need a witness signature tomorrow morning." Tomorrow morning. That phrase hit me wrong. Too fast. Too neat. And suddenly, all I could hear was Eleanor Pike's voice. "Slow the whole thing down." I looked Travis dead in the eye and said, "I'd like to read everything first." And honey, for half a second, his smile slipped. For just a split second, Travis's face changed. Not the whole face, just the eyes. like watching somebody quietly lock a door behind them. Then the smile came right back. Smooth as butter. Well, sure, he said. Absolutely. I've got everything upstairs in my rental. We can go through it tonight if that'll make you feel better. If that'll make you feel better. Not if Grandma wants that. Not if it's the right thing to do. If it'll make me feel better. That stuck with me. I smiled back and said, appreciate it, sugar. But inside, something had started scratching at the back of my mind. The kind of feeling you try to ignore because the alternative hurts too much. We rode the elevator back upstairs in silence. When the doors opened, I could hear Diane coughing from halfway down the hallway. That wet, painful cough hospice patients get near the end. I hurried toward her room. Travis stayed behind a second checking his phone. I noticed his jaw tighten reading something on the screen. Then he slid the phone away real quick when he saw me glance back. By the time I walked into Diane's room, she was struggling to catch her breath while a nurse adjusted her oxygen tubing. Her hands were trembling. I sat beside her bed and rubbed lotion onto her knuckles the way I used to do for our mama. Diane looked up at me and whispered, "Did he talk to you?" I nodded. "He says you want to handle property paperwork." Her eyes shut immediately. Not relieved. Exhausted. Then she whispered something so soft I almost missed it. "Don't let him bully me. Now let me tell you something. When your older sister, the woman who once punched a man in a bowling alley parking lot for grabbing my wrist in 1982, says she's scared of being bullied, that'll freeze your blood." I leaned closer and asked, "Diane, what exactly is he trying to get you to sign?" Before she could answer, Travis walked into the room smiling again like nothing happened. "Hey Grandma, nurse says your vitals look better." Lie. I'd seen the nurse's face. Nothing looked better. But Diane went quiet instantly. Wouldn't look at either of us. That silence said more than words ever could. Around 6 that evening, Travis said he needed to meet somebody from legal, and disappeared for nearly 2 hours. The second he left, Eleanor Pike rolled herself across the hallway in her wheelchair. I'll never forget that image. Tiny old woman. Pink slippers. Oxygen tube under her nose. Rolling through the hallway like she was on a mission from God. She parked herself beside me and whispered, "He's rushing because he's desperate." I stared at her. She nodded toward the elevator. My son used to get that same look right before he needed money. I sighed. "Ma'am, maybe I'm overthinking this." "No, honey," she said quietly. "You're underthinking it." Then she reached into the pocket of her robe and pulled out a little spiral notebook. Pages bent and worn. Numbers written everywhere. She tapped it with one shaky finger. My boy drained every account I had before I even realized what was happening. I didn't know what to say. Eleanor looked down the hallway to make sure Travis wasn't coming. Then she whispered, "People think scams happen with strangers online." She shook her head slowly. "No, ma'am. The dangerous ones know your birthday." That sentence hit me like ice water. A little later that night, Melanie arrived from Denver. Lord, I nearly cried seeing her. Messy ponytail. Wrinkled sweater. Still carrying grading papers in her tote bag because teachers never really stop working. The second she walked into Diane's room, Diane started crying. Not dramatic sobbing. Just silent tears sliding sideways into the pillow. Melanie kissed her forehead and said, "I'm here, Grandma. I'm here." Travis showed back up maybe 20 minutes later carrying takeout bags and acting cheerful as all get out. "Family dinner," he announced. Nobody touched the food much. The tension in that room was thicker than wet cement. At one point Travis started talking about how expensive hospice care was. Then he mentioned taxes. Then maintenance costs on the lake house. Then insurance issues. Every road somehow circled back to money. Melanie caught my eye twice during dinner. She noticed it too. After Diane fell asleep around 10:30, Melanie and I stepped into the hallway. She asked quietly, "Is it just me or is Travis acting weird?" That right there told me I wasn't crazy. I lowered my voice. He's trying to get your grandma to sign documents tomorrow. Melanie frowned immediately. What documents? Property transfer papers. Her face darkened. She told me last month she wanted the house sold and split between all 4 grandkids. Well now, that was the first real crack in Travis's story. Asked, "You sure?" Melanie nodded instantly. She said she wanted everybody treated equal because favoritism tore this family apart once already. That made my stomach drop clean to the floor. Because Travis had specifically told me the lake house was always meant for him alone. And now I knew at least one of them was lying. About midnight, Travis finally headed to his hotel. Before leaving, he squeezed my shoulder and said, "Morning's gonna be emotional. Best not to overcomplicate things. Best not to overcomplicate things." Translation: don't ask questions. The second he disappeared down the elevator hall, Melanie turned to me and whispered, "Aunt Lorraine, I think Grandma's afraid of him." I looked across the hallway. Eleanor Pike was sitting in the dark of room 214 watching us through the cracked doorway. Not smiling. Not blinking. Just watching. Like she already knew tomorrow was gonna blow this family wide open. And Lord, she was right. The next morning started before sunrise. I woke up stiff as a board in the little sleeper chair beside Diane's bed. The room smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee. Outside the window, Arizona sky was still dark blue. Diane was awake. Barely. She looked exhausted. I held her hand and asked softly, "Do you want to sign anything today?" She swallowed hard. Then whispered, "No." One word. Clear as church bells. No. Right then and there I should have marched downstairs and canceled everything. But family has a way of making you hesitate even when your instincts are screaming. At around 9:15, Travis arrived carrying a leather portfolio. And 10 minutes later, the attorney showed up. Not some friendly old family lawyer either. Young guy. Perfect teeth. Gray suit probably cost more than my first car. He walked in smiling like this was a normal business appointment instead of a dying woman's room. "Good morning, everybody," he said brightly. I felt sick instantly. Diane looked terrified. The attorney laid several documents across the rolling hospital tray table. Travis picked up a pen and leaned toward Diane. "Okay, Grandma, this'll only take a minute." That's when Eleanor Pike appeared in the doorway. And honey, what happened next changed everything. Eleanor Pike didn't knock. She didn't ask permission. She just rolled herself right into that hospice room like she owned the air inside it. Tiny woman. Pink robe. Oxygen tube swinging slightly as she moved. And when she stopped in that doorway, everything went quiet. I mean dead quiet. Even the air conditioning sounded like it was afraid to keep running. The attorney glanced over, clearly annoyed. "Ma'am, this is a private." Eleanor cut him off. Not loud. Not angry. Just calm as a winter morning. "I've seen that stack of papers before." Travis stiffened. I saw it immediately. That little twitch in his jaw again. The attorney forced a polite smile. "Excuse me." Eleanor pointed a shaking finger at the documents on the tray table. "That middle page," she said. "The one under the property transfer." Nobody moved. Diane's eyes slowly shifted toward Eleanor like she was watching a lifeline drop into a burning room. Travis laughed lightly. A fake little chuckle. "Ma'am, I think you're confused. This is standard estate processing." Eleanor didn't even look at him. She looked at me. Then at Melanie standing near the window. Then back at the papers. "I was a bookkeeper for 32 years, she said. "And I've seen that exact structure before." She paused. Then added, "Layered signatures. Hidden amendments. That's not standard. That's bait." That word hit the room like a slap. Bait. The attorney straightened his tie. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step outside." Eleanor didn't move. Instead, she reached into her robe pocket and pulled out that same worn spiral notebook I'd seen before. But this time, she opened it. Flipped pages. Her finger stopped on something written in faded ink. "I had a man do this to me," she said quietly. 12 years ago. Her voice cracked just a little. Same setup. Same urgency. Same just sign here nonsense. She looked at Travis for the first time. And her eyes were sharp. Too sharp for someone so fragile. He took my house within 48 hours of me signing. The room shifted. Melanie took a step forward. What are you saying? She asked. Eleanor didn't hesitate. I'm saying those papers are not what they look like. Silence again. Thick. Heavy. Then Travis finally spoke. And this time the charm was gone. Ma'am, you don't even know my family. Eleanor cut him off again. I know your type. Boom. That one landed. Even the nurse outside the door froze. Diane suddenly tried to sit up. Weak. Shaking. But awake now. Fully awake. She whispered. Travis, what is she talking about? That's when the attorney stepped in fast. Everyone, let's not escalate emotions. Melanie suddenly grabbed the edge of the document tray. No, she said firmly. We're escalating everything. She looked right at Travis. Where is the original will? Travis smiled again. But it didn't reach his eyes. It's being updated for efficiency. Efficient for who? I snapped before I could stop myself. That shut him up for half a second. Just half. But Eleanor wasn't done. She rolled closer to the bedside. Her voice dropped low. Sweetheart, she said to Diane gently. Did anyone read you all 3 documents out loud? Diane hesitated. Her eyes flickered toward Travis. Then toward me. Then she whispered. No. That was it. That was the crack. Eleanor turned sharply to the attorney. Then she never consented to anything she hasn't seen in full. The attorney opened his mouth. Closed it. 'Cause legally she was right. Travis suddenly stepped forward. His voice sharpened. This is ridiculous. Grandma is tired, she's medicated. And this woman is clearly. Eleanor slammed her notebook shut. Not violently, but firmly enough that the sound echoed. And she said something I'll never forget. I am not confused. Then she looked straight at him. I've lived through this already. And I'm not watching another old woman get rushed into losing everything, while everyone stands around pretending it's normal. The room went still again. Diane's breathing got shaky. I grabbed her hand. It's okay, I whispered. But I wasn't sure it was. Because Travis was now staring at Eleanor like she had ruined something important. Something planned. The attorney finally tried to regain control. Let's proceed professionally. We can review each document separately. Melanie cut him off. No. She pulled her phone out. I want a second legal opinion here. Right now. Travis laughed again, but it sounded forced. You're all overreacting. This is a simple family transfer. Eleanor tilted her head. Then why are there 3 documents stapled in a way that hides the second signature line? That question changed the temperature in the room, because nobody had noticed that. But now we all saw it. The attorney hesitated. Just a fraction. But enough. Eleanor pointed again. Remove the top page. Silence. The attorney didn't move. So Melanie did. She stepped forward and lifted the first document. And underneath it was exactly what Eleanor said. A second agreement. Completely separate. Already pre-signed in one place. My stomach dropped. Melanie whispered. What the hell is this? Diane let out a weak sound. Something between confusion and betrayal. And then Travis finally snapped. Stop touching the paperwork. But his voice cracked slightly. Just slightly. And I caught it. Eleanor caught it too. She leaned closer to him. Very calm. Very steady. And said, You didn't expect anyone in this room to question you. Travis didn't answer. That was answer enough. Outside the room, I could hear footsteps rushing down the hallway. A nurse had clearly called someone. Security maybe. Or administration. Things were escalating fast now. Too fast. Diane suddenly grabbed my hand harder. Her voice barely came out. Lorraine, is this real? I looked at her. then at the documents, then at Travis. And for the first time in my life, I didn't recognize the boy I used to buy baseball gloves for. Before I could answer, Eleanor Pike did something none of us expected. She reached into her notebook again and pulled out a folded photocopy. She handed it directly to the attorney. "Call this number," she said. "Ask them about the signature matching on page 2. The attorney stared at her, then at the paper, then at Travis, and finally, he stepped away from the table. Just one step, but enough, because in that moment, we all understood something had already started unraveling, and there was no putting it back together. Not anymore. The attorney stepped out into the hallway with that folded paper in his hand, and I swear to you, the second the door clicked shut behind him, the room felt different. Like the truth had finally been invited in, and it wasn't polite about it. Travis stood there frozen. No smile now. No charm. Just that same tight look I'd seen before when things stopped going his way. Diane was staring at him like she didn't recognize her own grandson anymore. And that right there? That hurts worse than anything else in this world. Melanie stayed close to the document tray, arms crossed. Eleanor Pike didn't move at all. She just watched him. Quiet. Steady. Like she'd already seen how this story ended years ago. A minute passed. Maybe 2. Then the attorney came back in. But his face had changed. All business was gone. Now it was something else. Concern. He cleared his throat. "Miss Mercer, I need to ask you something directly." Diane blinked slowly. "Yes." He held up the paperwork. "This second signature. Did you ever discuss this with your grandson in detail?" Diane's lips trembled. "No." That was all she needed to say. The attorney nodded once, then turned toward Travis. "I'm going to need you to step outside with me." Travis scoffed. "For what?" "This is family business." The attorney didn't raise his voice, but it dropped colder. "This is potentially a legal misrepresentation issue." That word changed everything. Misrepresentation. I saw Travis's face tighten. Just a flicker of panic now slipping through the cracks. He looked at me, then Melanie, then Diane, like he was searching for someone to back him up. Nobody did. Even I couldn't anymore. Not after that second document. Not after Eleanor's notebook. Not after the way everything suddenly felt wrong. Finally Travis said quietly, "You're all making a mistake." Eleanor finally spoke again. "No," she said. "You made it when you thought nobody in this room would read past the first page." That shut him up completely. The attorney guided him toward the door. And this time Travis didn't fight it. But right before he left, he looked back at Diane. And for half a second, there was something almost human there. Not anger. Not guilt. Something closer to desperation. Then he walked out. And the door closed behind him. Silence again. But different silence this time. Not heavy. Empty. Diane let out a breath like she'd been holding it for an hour. Melanie sat down slowly in the chair like her legs had given out. I stayed standing because I didn't trust my knees yet. Eleanor rolled her chair closer to Diane's bed. Softly she said, "I'm sorry, sweetheart." Diane shook her head slowly. "I don't understand. He's my boy." Her voice broke on the last word. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about paperwork anymore. This was about heartbreak. Real deep heartbreak. Outside the room we could hear voices now. Security. Staff. Someone arguing. The situation was officially out of private hands. About 10 minutes later the attorney came back alone. He looked tired. Like he'd aged 5 years in 10 minutes. He spoke carefully. "Based on what I've reviewed, these documents were prepared with incomplete disclosure." Melanie whispered. "Meaning what?" He sighed. "Meaning they should not have been presented as a single unified agreement." Diane closed her eyes. Eleanor reached over and gently took her hand. And for the first time, Diane didn't pull away. The attorney continued. "I've paused all processing. Nothing will be signed today. That was the moment the air finally changed. Not relief exactly, but safety returning. Slowly, carefully, like something crawling back into place after a storm. A nurse stepped in and checked Diane's vitals. Melanie stayed by her side. Eleanor leaned back in her chair like she was exhausted now that the fight was over. And me? I just stood there thinking about how close we'd come. Too close. Because if Eleanor Pike had stayed silent, if she had minded her own business, if she had done what most people do, we wouldn't have caught it in time. We would have lost everything in a single signature. A few hours later, after the room settled, the attorney came back one more time. This time with printed confirmation that everything had been frozen pending full legal review. He left quietly. No speeches. No drama. Just paperwork undone. And that was it. Travis never came back into the room that day. He was gone before sunset. Just like that. No goodbye. No explanation. Just gone. And Diane? She didn't speak for a long time after that. Just stared at the ceiling. Holding my hand. Quiet tears slipping down the side of her face. Eleanor Pike eventually wheeled herself back toward her room. Before she disappeared into the hallway, she looked back at me and said, "Don't ignore your gut again." And then she was gone too. The hallway felt different after that. Like something had been removed from it. Something dangerous. Something we didn't fully understand until it was already over. That night I stayed with Diane until she fell asleep. And I kept thinking about one thing over and over again. How close silence had come to costing us everything. And how one woman in room 214, who didn't owe us anything at all, decided that silence wasn't an option. And because of that, we still had a family left to save. If I could go back to that hospice room and change one thing, it wouldn't be what I said. It would be that I listened sooner. That's my real regret. Not that I didn't understand what was happening, but that I kept talking myself out of what I already felt was wrong. That little voice in your chest that says something's off? I used to ignore it. I called it overthinking. Called it stress. Now I know what it really is. It's your first truth before your excuses show up. And I almost paid for ignoring it with my sister's entire legacy. What still gets me is this. I wasn't saved by experience. I wasn't saved by intelligence. I was saved by a stranger I almost dismissed because she didn't belong in my story. Eleanor Pike wasn't family. She wasn't involved. She had no reason to step in. But she did. And that one moment of courage from someone I didn't even know changed everything. That's the part one can't shake. Because it means the danger was never the only problem. My silence was. Here's what I learned the hard way. If something feels rushed, it's usually wrong. If someone gets uncomfortable when you ask questions, that's not your problem. That's your answer. And if you feel pressured to decide right now in a moment that matters, that's exactly the moment you slow down. Not speed up. Slow down. I used to think family meant trust. But trust without questions is just permission for mistakes. And I used to think strangers didn't matter. But sometimes the only person willing to tell you the truth is the one who has nothing to gain from you. That's the irony. The people closest to you can be the hardest to see clearly. And the ones furthest away can see straight through everything. So if you're hearing me right now, take this with you. Don't rush your life to make someone else comfortable. Don't sign what you don't understand. Don't ignore that feeling just because everyone else is acting confident. Confidence can be performance. Urgency can be manipulation. But your gut? It doesn't lie fast. Just gets ignored fast. And I promise you this. The cost of pausing is small. The cost of being wrong without pausing can be everything. So slow down. Ask again. And if something still doesn't sit right, walk away until it does. That's the lesson I learned too late. Don't be the one who learns it the same way. If this story hit you, take a second to like this video and subscribe for more real-life stories like this. And I really want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever trusted your gut and later found out you were right? Thank you for watching and staying with this story till the end. I truly appreciate your time and support. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.